Welcome to Slash Forward. I have a secret I've been keeping all this time that I'd like to share with you now, and it's that I am a freaking savage. I watched Hostel so we can talk about it and decide together if it's as bad for you as they say. And we don't even know who they are, so why are we letting them control our lives? Well, we'll put that to bed as we watch Paxton and Josh, with their Icelandic pal Oli, celebrate the final leg of their backpacking journey that essentially entailed screwing their way across Europe. But when they get hooked up with a choice Slovakian town in which they can find the best girls the continent has to offer, the situation they find themselves in seems almost too good to be true, which for them means it's time to go full bore. I guess it's really anyone's guess if this strategy is ideal, but we'll see if we can figure it out. In addition, we'll try to sort out if this film is an experience you've been missing that'll make you feel alive again. Be sure to leave a comment with your rankings of most gory movies, and check out some of the other disgusting pustules offered up on the channel. Let's get to it. We open to sounds of dripping water and sloppy preparations as a chipper gentleman whistles and takes real pleasure in tidying up his workspace. Then we rock our balls off as a gaggle of young bros on vacay dip out to see what sights Amsterdam has to offer. Of course, they're focusing primarily on its wicked head shops and top-tier prosties. The fellas round out their day at the most vigorous of dancing academies. Unfortunately, Josh's fanny pack, necessary as it is really killing the vibe, brah. Paxton, however, is determined to win Regional Wingman of the Year, so he builds up his boy and sends him back in there. But he got him a little too jacked because a simple misunderstanding results in a violent ejection from the club. A classic in American tourism. They celebrate this minor victory, and as they peruse the red light district, it's revealed that at least a portion of this trip was intended to help Josh get over his fresh breakup. This involves, we come to learn, watching the silhouettes of his friends engage in a devil's three-way. This takes him somewhat out of the mood. He does find the spa room to be quite warm and inviting, but not so much so as to prompt him to proposition the madam. Their hard partying results in Oli discovering upon their return that they've blown curfew. He attempts to sing his way back into the owner's good graces, but they don't play that shit out here, so the boys are forced to duck into a side window. This results in a fortuitous meeting as Lexi, an affable young gentleman, has a direct line to some of the loveliest ladies around. He has a friend who runs an off-the-map hostel in a little town in Slovakia, where Americans are considered exotic, automatically boosting their eligibility. Sounds too good to be true, which is how they know it's legit, because why would he tell such an obvious lie? So the sun barely rises before the boys find themselves on a bullet train to Cumtown. They're joined by a Dutch businessman traveling from town to town for the sake of his daughter. Surprisingly, it's revealed that Oli the Wild Man actually has a 6-year-old daughter as well. When they mention their plans, even this crusty old booger approves of their choice to seek out girls in Slovakia. Then, your boy demonstrates his intimate relationship with nature by manhandling his shaved chicken breast and waxing philosophic about his reverence for the animal that died to nourish him. It's a salad, bro. After an honest misread of the energy, resulting in a playful knee squeeze, he finds himself another car. When they disembark, the amenities at the train station do not make the situation appear promising, but their cab winds them through the countryside and to a picturesque little town nestled behind a grand stone wall. Turns out, despite being under the radar, the hostel ain't hard to find, nor are the ladies. They swap passports for room keys, and then are surprised to discover that they go co-ed out in these parts. Also, there isn't much to do during the day outside of hitting the spa hard as hell. Looking to find his groove, Josh begins to seduce Natalia with an anecdote about his foreskin, but only steps over him a bit by embracing her homeland with a little Russian top 40. Later on, though, we discover that Josh is clearly the superior dancer. It's also revealed that the stories were true, as the ladies lap up the boys and keep them awash in free drugs. When Vala from the front desk shows up, they decide to follow up their dancing with more dancing, but Josh steps out to be free of Natalia's cigarette smoke. This unexpectedly puts him in immediate danger of being mauled by a gang of kids looking for nickels. He's saved when his open admirer shows up and confirms if you give him some Pez, they'll leave you alone. Seeing the man in a new light, Josh offers to buy him a drink. Inside, they have a veiled conversation about whether to choose to act on one's latent homosexuality before turning in for the night. Back at the room, it's going down for real as Oli tries to help Josh both get in the mood and understand the basic mechanics of what he's meant to do, which he then does until the sun comes up. In the morning, the fellas let their bed sheets just barely conceal their shame as they congratulate one another and compare notes on the prior night's conquest. but then grow concerned when Oli isn't in the room and doesn't show for brunch, his favorite meal. The front desk lad confirms that he's listed as having checked out earlier that morning. The most they can do is leave a note for him if he comes back and asks Svetlana to call them if she runs across Vala and learns any new information. But no sooner do they go about their business than does Kana run up to show them a picture she was sent indicating Oli ran off with Yuki? As they wander the town, Paxton opens up about this one time as a kid when he watched a girl drown to death and how he has nightmares about it on the regular. Hey, thanks for sharing, bud. They are then confronted by the town's wayward children again, and Josh imparts his wisdom to help Paxton learn the local customs. Then they see Oli wander by and have to rush to keep him in sight since he's not responding to their call. This requires them to buy 2 tickets to the torture museum. They enjoy a few exhibits, and then see the man they've been following is just wearing Oli's jacket. It's not Oli, so false alert. He claims to be the original owner of the jacket and bids them adieu. On their way out, the boys get a message in broken English, from what we discover to just be Oli's head. The remainder of his whereabouts are still unknown. The man and his company then walks down a hallway toward a woman presumed to be Yuki. Paxton and Josh make arrangements to buddy up with Kana on their trip to the train station the next morning. Josh is so distraught that he even brushes off the ladies, but Paxton doesn't want to leave more than he wants to make love. So he takes great pains to smooth things over with them, while also reassuring Josh that quick goodbyes are totally an Icelandic thing. Probably. So they party it up at the discotheque, but the sitch with his girlfriend is still fresh, so he's really haunted by this most recent abandonment, resulting in him leaving early and alone. He gets back to the hostel looking absolutely haggard and is helped to his room by Vala, who is accompanied by a strange man. Back at the club, Paxton finds this new dynamic unstimulating. Plus, he misses his bro. He steps away to the restroom and they give some Eurotrash scumbag the high sign, but he mistakes the storeroom for the bathroom, but then uses it as a bedroom. Josh wakes up in what could be a bathroom, but one where they do surgeries? Different cultures can be confusing sometimes. He is unshrouded by a very serious man and very thankful he wore his sexy underwear. Josh pleads for answers to this baffling situation, but instead gets warmed up with a power drill to various areas of his body. It's then revealed that the person inflicting this violence is the Dutchman. He's sad that he was never able to pass his board exam due to having the shakes, but he misses the surgeon's godlike powers over life and death, and has tired of the day-to-day banality of business things. That's cool. But Josh really would like to go ahead and hit the old dusty trail. So he lets him go, but not before snipping his little tendons, forcing him to army crawl toward the door. Ultimately, he goes back on his word, insisting he's the big man around here and ending their scenario. Paxton is found well after last call and forced out after having a chance to sleep it off. Then, back at the front desk, he learns that he was checked out earlier that morning by an unknown party, as was Kana. He requests to continue his stay and returns to the room where he has an unusually familiar first contact with what turns out to be his new roomies, much like the old roomies. He tries to call Josh to no avail, and Svetlana's not returning his yells. With little info to go on, he tries to identify the location where Oli's picture was taken, but in the process of sorting that out, he gets his phone snatched. In response, he nearly kills a kid. Once he reevaluates what he's doing here, he checks in with the constable, who will keep an eye out, but encourages him to wait for his pals back at the hostel. As he wanders the mean streets, he briefly catches sight of Svetlana and follows her into a Slovakian diner. He finds the ladies here acting fairly nonchalant. They claim that Josh is with Oli, which isn't a lie, but he has little patience for their giggle party.
Where are my friends?
They tell him that his friends are at an art show, strange as that may be. They get permission from their chauffeur to take him and are soon on their way. As they drive along, they get juiced up on what they call gum and shortly arrive at the courtyard of that impressive phallic monument. It doesn't look very artsy, but he's not very cultured. The clientele appears a bit rough around the edges, but he still heads in to see what the fuss is about. Natalia gets the giggles again about his curiosity, then points the way down a long hall. Upon arrival, he finds the exhibit to reside outside his expectations. This gives him the insight that this place is like a freaky little pleasure experience for wealthy sickos. He's left in a dark room for some time, only awoken later to be labeled by nationality. Once that's done, he gets a special room buddy who gets himself all worked up before showing Paxton his scissors, and subsequently his gardening tools. But when Paxton picks up on a couple of phrases and hits him with that sweet German tongue,
Wenn du mich tötest, wird es dein Leben zerstören.
He takes his torture daddy out of the moment, but this was only long enough to request a complimentary ball gag to keep him quiet. He then gets back down to the business of murder edging. He's not as experienced as he seems, and holds it too long, risking his subject's death by choking. After releasing the gag, he trims off Paxton's fingers and handcuffs, which create a slipping hazard and cause him to Leatherface himself. As he wriggles around in simultaneous pain and pleasure, Paxton works to jerk himself loose and ends things quickly with the gun. He makes a little noise and plays possum for when the guard shows up, so he can catch him by surprise as well. Once fully free of his restraints, he costumes up, slips into a side room, and costumes back down again, and then stows away on the refuse table. They eventually arrive in the basement where Igor starts cleaning up old parts for incineration, and Paxton comes face to face with his former bro. Unfortunately, he drops his fingers and is unable to retrieve them before they're put in the bin, so he can basically wave bye-bye to high fives. He hammers the trash man and escapes to the elevator, which he takes all the way to the top. His absence is noticed right before he finds the locker room and peers out a window to see the Polizei are in cahoots with these freaks, so he'll have to slip out quietly. To accomplish this, he starts dressing up like a rich guy. He finishes up just in time as a gossipy rich compadre and tries to get him to spill all the gory beans about his experiences so he can figure out the best way to go about his first time. After deciding he'll get the most out of this experience by doing it slow, he leaves behind his gun. Paxton digs deep to push through the pain and make it out to the fleet, but then he hears shrieks of pain that could possibly be Kana, so he heads back and follows the sound. He discovers her to be that one weirdo's special project. Thinking it's all perverts in here, he tells Paxton to get out or join in, and Paxton wastes no time in dispatching the man. Kana's in a bit of a state with her eyeball just out. They need to get her in a better spot for escaping, so he helps her out with a little snippety snip, and once she gets over the initial shock, they slink away together. They make it into the old diesel and go ripping off down the road toward the train station. After a caravan finally makes way, Paxton finds himself in a primo position for administering justice to Svetlana, Natalia, and Alexei, who he takes out with extreme prejudice. What he doesn't finish is cleaned up by the negligent disregard of their pursuers. They eventually arrive at the Alley of Lost Children and are able to buy their undying loyalty with a large bag of sweets. Because of this, when the guards arrive and attempt to gain passage, the newsies break out their sticks and stones so as to initiate the breaking of bones. Out in the open countryside, they have one less obstacle to overcome. They're stopped at a checkpoint where the authorities are checking cars and beating civilians. Rather than risk it, they make it the rest of the way on foot. They hide out on the platform due to all the heat right now. While Paxton's busy figuring what to do, Kana catches sight of what was done to her and decides that she is not able to live with this reconfiguration. Her death creates a distraction that allows Paxton to safely and discreetly board the train. All he has to do now is be cool. But then he hears the Dutchman giving his salad speech. Classic Dutchman. So now his new goal is to try to get some alone time with the old geezer. He follows him into the kabinki, which I believe means smoking lounge. Paxton saddles up next to him, using a clever ploy to gain access to his hand, so he may inflict sympathetic finger wounds, before making him eat his salad again, and then cutting his throat. Now your boy can relax, as the scales have been balanced, his hemorrhaging wound is closed, and is heading, we presume, to the closest American embassy. This movie is definitely not hiding anything from us. If it wasn't made clear, this town has a seedy underbelly of scumbags who seduce and kidnap travelers visiting the hostel to provide to their wealthy clientele, who are looking to find new experiences and ways to again reach that high of being a big man, since they already have the resources to do whatever they want. And partying, drugs, ladies, big purchases, and other means of spreading their money around has become banal. It's basically Jeff Bezos before Blue Origin. Just to clarify a comment I made about Josh and the Dutchman, it seemed that the Dutch businessman was picking up on a vibe in the train car. Then, at the bar, their discussion was around deciding what path to take in life, and how he appreciated his own choice because it resulted in his daughter, whom he loves very much. It was heavily implied he was trying to convey to Josh that he would need to make a choice at some point. That, along with Josh's unwillingness to engage in sexual acts early on, and what seemed like a slow start with Natalia that was accompanied by a far-off gaze, gave the impression that he was a closeted homosexual. I don't know if that adds or changes anything beyond giving us some deeper insight into the character. Similar to how Paxton talked about how his experience with the drowning girl had an effect on him. It didn't mean anything to the story outside of adding some deeper understanding. Other than that, I'm not sure there are any references I made that are still hanging out there and require additional clarification. There's also nothing I can think of in the movie that seemed contradictory or unexamined. Feel free to correct me on that in the comments. I think there are a lot of detractors of this movie for various reasons. It rolled in with the wave of torture porn designated movies. It's somewhat low budget, and it definitely has a sort of amateur feel or aesthetic to it. I'm not totally sure how to describe it. It looks like the type of smaller movie where the director feels like they're really breaking boundaries and putting out something the normies just won't understand. Except it ends up being preachy or boring or not that extreme. But the thing is that Hostel is not that. I would describe it as a poorly written, in terms of the characters and dialogue, but well-structured movie. Josh getting his early after Oli was already gone, and after they did the most to establish his character, was jarring. But then it puts us in a position to recognize how lucky Paxton was that he never found the bathroom, raising tons of doubt and tension about what was going to happen next. Similarly, Josh learning about how to manage the roving gang of kids, imparting that knowledge upon Paxton, and then Paxton coming back and leveraging that knowledge later was just good. You can hate the movie for a number of reasons, but you can't really take that away from it. Obviously, torture porn was a huge deal around the time this came out, but the moniker was usually applied in a dismissive rather than just descriptive manner. This film certainly didn't hold back on the sexual energy, and the gore it provided actually came in the form of torture. However, I have heard people say that the first half was basically a porno that then transitioned into a hardcore gore movie. I think that's a bit of an overstatement. Interestingly, as I think back on the sexual nature of the film, I'm having a hard time coming up with a gratuitous scene that didn't serve the story or character development. To some degree, we could talk about Oli's ass, but it did establish him as an Icelandic wild man. Probably the background sex in Alexi's room would be it, and that's not much. So who is this movie for? I found that I may have a skewed perspective on these things, so I'll have to elaborate somewhat. In terms of my perspective, I know the Italian film Demons has the reputation of being a gore fest and fairly brutal. I didn't think it was that bad, but you can check it out on the channel and see for yourself. Anyway, I watched it recently with an audience, and it hit completely different when I was around other people who aren't as used to that type of thing. So I'm somewhat desensitized, but I'm not a gore hound. I enjoy crazy off-the-wall depictions in the 80s style, where there's almost a cartoonish element to how far they're going with it. What hits me the hardest are more simple depictions of brutality that are played out very seriously. That's where I think torture porn doesn't really impact me too much. Things in the Saw movies got progressively more extreme as the series went on, but almost to the point where they were trying way too hard. When you're doing so much that you have to create a complete latex person that you can rip apart or quarter or disembowel, it's not as effective. It makes it look like you're abusing a rubber toy. In the case of Hostel, there was certainly a lot of gore. However, there were far more cutaways to off-screen torture than I would have expected, as well as extreme close-ups so you can't really see what's going on. All that to say, it's still pretty bad, but I don't think it's as bad as its reputation indicates. If you're a fan of gore, exploitation, or grindhouse movies, you should definitely check this one out. If you have more mild tastes, it may be a bit much. It sort of has the visual feel and atmosphere of an I Know What You Did Last Summer or Final Destination film, but with way more nudity and on-screen gore. Before we go, I'd like to give a huge thanks to my donors memorialized in the Hall of Headshots. I have a website set up where you can support the channel through donations or merch. Any donation unlocks a growing collection of uncensored movie recaps. And if you enjoyed the video, I would love for you to become part of the channel by subscribing. Thanks for watching.